Hello everyone, and welcome to the review of Nikon J1 mirrorless camera. So there's been a bit of a delay in getting to this review, and part of that is because of me trying to take some pictures with this camera, and also it's because I want to get a hold of a V1 so I can make some comparisons between these two cameras. So why don't we start off with a comparison first, since I did previously review the Nikon V1 camera already. You can see that video in my channel. So there's some obvious physical differences. Note this is an optional grip. This is not part of the original camera. So they're both similarly shaped like a rectangle, kind of like a brick. And one difference build-wise is that the J1 is made out of aluminum alloy, or I think it's just aluminum, whereas the V1 is magnesium alloy plus some aluminum. But really, when you feel it, when you hold the camera, it feels pretty solid. It feels like cold metal. Top part is plastic, back is plastic, bottom is plastic, so only the white part you see is metal, besides the lens, which is white plastic. Whereas on the V1, the whole front side is magnesium alloy. The top and bottom and back are plastic as well. So, other differences, the screens. The J1 has a 460,000 dot screen, whereas the V1 has a 921,000 dot screen. But really, when I'm using these cameras, I don't notice it that much, the difference. So I really think it's kind of, that shouldn't be your decision factor if you're to decide between these two cameras. So besides the screen difference, there's a little bit of a weight difference. This one is 294 grams, whereas this is 277 grams. This is, I think, without lens or battery. So the difference is minimal. It's less than 10%. So this one feels just a little more substantial because it's thicker, and this one doesn't feel light by any means, but it also feels pretty solid. And there's some things on the V1 that the J1 does not have. The most obvious thing is this EVF. So the EVF is a 1.4 million dot EVF, and it's not the biggest EVF that you can find, but it definitely works very well. And the other thing is mechanical shutter is available on the V1 and not the J1. So this camera doesn't seem to be focusing. By the way, I'm filming this with the OMD with the 25mm 1.4. So this has mechanical shutter. The benefit of mechanical shutter is better flash sync, and also when you're using electronic shutter, which is the only thing this J1 can do, sometimes you get artifacts when you're going at very high shutter speeds. So that's not a problem with this one. You have the option of using mechanical. The other thing is the J1 has a built-in flash. So it's mechanically activated. You just press this, comes out like that. Kind of like a Lego toy, sort of. So it's built-in flash, which comes in pretty handy. This one does not come with flash, but rather than that, it comes with an accessory port. So this port accepts a flash unit like so. So you can attach it onto the V1 like this, and it's a kind of a cute little flash. You can bend it, rotate it. Has an illuminator on there. It's a distance off the lens so you don't get red eye. So not very full featured, but it works. But sometimes when you're not carrying this, it's just nice to have an internal flash, in which case the J1 wins. So other than that, let me see, there's also the battery, which is different between the two. So let me just take out the batteries. So here is the battery for the V1. It's pretty substantial. It's the same one used in the D7000 and the D800. And whereas on the J1, it's a dinky little battery that looks like this. So both are lithium batteries, but this one has a lot higher capacity, the one on the V1. This is, let me see, 1020 milliamp hour, and this is 1900 milliamp hour, which is one reason why the J1 can only take about 200 photos, whereas the V1 can take about 450 photos. And I do notice that in real life, where this runs down much sooner than this battery. So, but nowadays replacement batteries are very cheap, so that may not be a problem for you. Now, one last thing to mention between these two cameras is that this is $499 new, and then this is $749. So there's a $250 difference between the two cameras, and for the additional features this provides, it might or may not be worth it for you. So if EVF is crucial for you, then it might be worth it. Otherwise, I will actually just get the J1 plus an extra battery. Alright, so let's move on to the actual subject of this review, which is the J1 camera. So, first thing I want to talk about is the handling of this camera. So, once again, like the V1, this part of the camera is smooth. Actually, the V1 has a notch on here, and this does not even have a notch, so it's completely smooth. And you're supposed to hold it like this, so kind of like a compact camera. Because it's not extremely thin, it's actually okay, and the fact that it's kind of light, it's a decent kind of handling, but I would have preferred a grip here. And of course you can get an aftermarket third-party grip such as this one, and you can just stick it on there and it makes the camera feel a lot easier to hold. So in terms of build quality, like I mentioned, this is part metal, part plastic, but looking at the lines, they're built very tightly, and overall I will say the build quality is very high, and it looks like a high quality product. So the screen, like I mentioned before, it's 460,000 dots, and for my picture taking, I find it to be quite sufficient, and the viewing angles are pretty good, as you can tell, and also the colors are pretty bright even out in the daylight, so the screen is very nice. The autofocus speed is something that is identical to the V1, so the two actually share the same sensor, the 1-inch Nikon 1 sensor that's 10 megapixels. So the autofocus speed is very fast. It uses this hybrid technology where it does contrast detection and or face detection depending on the amount of light. So in bright situations it will default to face detection, and basically the focus is instantaneous. So it's faster than the Nikon D3 that I own, and there is almost no delay. But as soon as light goes dark, or when it can't find enough contrast for the face array, then it will default to contrast detection, and then it becomes on par with other mirrorless cameras out there. And moving on to image quality, so this is again a repeat of what I said in the V1 review, because they share the same sensor. So if you're looking for an upgrade camera from your compact that will produce professional like photos with shallow depth of field or high dynamic range kind of feel to them, you will not get it with these two cameras, because the sensor is rather small and the dynamic range is very limited, especially when you don't shoot RAW. RAW will give you additional, I think, 1 to 2 stops of dynamic range, but if you shoot JPEG, which I suspect most users of J1 will do, the pictures will come out looking like kind of like other compact cameras. In other words, like the sky will be overblown when you're shooting landscape, or the shadow will be completely black. So things like that are not very appealing about this camera, the dynamic range. In terms of high ISO noise, I would say it's about on par with the 12 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor that I've used. And in other words, it's much better than compact cameras, but not nearly as good as APS-C size sensors. So if you're looking to use this for low light photography, then I would look elsewhere. For movie shooting, because of the hybrid autofocus, it will change focus very fast and accurately. So this is a bonus. Also, it does shoot, so basically you go into movie mode, and it has options here of HD, which is 1080, 1080p, or slow motion. So if you do slow motion, you can shoot at 400 frames per second at, I think, sub-VGA resolution, or 1200 frames per second, which is pretty ridiculous, but the resolution is very small. So you have these two options. The HD movie quality is very good. Some of the videos in my channel are shot with a V1 at HD setting. And while we're talking about that, let's go back to the stills mode. And here you can see you can do single frame, continuous, or continuous. So continuous, you can actually go up to 60 frames per second, which is ridiculously fast. However, you can only do so for about 10 pictures. So this is kind of a niche feature that I have not found a situation in which I need 60 frames per second, because I could just probably shoot a movie then, but it is there if you need it. You can also shoot, I think, about 10 frames per second, and it will have continuous autofocus, which is nice. So the hybrid autofocus on this definitely is a plus in terms of continuous shooting and movie shooting.